What are you saying, ladies and gents? It is your boy BucketHatSam, and we are back in today for another video. Today's video, we're going to be discussing the first manager to be sacked in the Premier League. Who do we think it will be? Let me know straight away down in the comments below. We're going to go through all the candidates that, in my opinion, are the managers that are under a bit of scrutiny, under a little bit of pressure, and we'll discuss the likelihood and go into kind of the details as to why. Let's just go straight into it. We're going to start off with Paul Heckingbottom, because before the season started, this is the man I believed was going to be sacked. Now, I think this is a really interesting one. They're currently sat bottom of the table, 6 games played, 17 goals conceded. I know obviously they conceded 8 against Newcastle, but I don't think he'll be the first one anymore. So before the season started, I said it on the podcast. If you go check it out, it's called BucketHatSam Talksball podcast on all platforms. I said before the season started, he was the manager I thought was going to get sacked straight away. But they've just lost 8-0. They're 6 games in. They've scored 5 goals. He would have been sacked already, in my opinion. They've got 1 point. I'd have expected it already, let's be honest. With that kind of form, that kind of start, you'd expect for them to have made a decision straight after the 8-0. And I don't think it makes any sense now for them to sack him, maybe in a couple of weeks' time. If results stay the same, surely they'd have sacked him already. Because an 8-0 drumming, regardless of who you are, I know Hasenhüttl somehow kept a job at Southampton, but we saw how that went in the end. You look at Scott Parker with the Bournemouth kind of situation. They sacked him instantly after that kind of result because you can't keep a manager after that, because it's unheard of results like that. So personally, I don't think he'll be the first one, even though I think he should have been sacked already. I don't think he will be, because he should have been sacked already. Next, we'll move on to Vincent Kompany. Now, this is a really interesting one. Currently sat second bottom of the table, joint amount of points. All three newly promoted side, all with only 1 point. But Burnley's a really interesting one because they've scored 4 goals and conceded 13, sat with -9 goal difference. Now, they've not had a very easy start to the Premier League, let's just say that. They've already played Manchester City, they've played Aston Villa, they've played Tottenham, they drew to Forest, they lost to Man United. So I think it's probably a bit harsh to say already Vincent Kompany should be sacked. When you look at that already, the fact that they've played so many European sides there already, Man United, Tottenham, a big team, Villa in Europe, Man City. So I think it's a little bit harsh and a little bit early to say he has to be sacked. Yes, there could be discussions about the fact that his tactics are maybe naive, and maybe the fact that he's been struggling, his team haven't looked great, and they maybe need to think and probably be a bit more rational thinking when he's going into games, not going toe-to-toe with the likes of Manchester City and Tottenham. We saw that especially trying to play out from the back against Tottenham. So maybe if he needs to have a rethink and a rejig of his side, but I think coming into these next few games is really where we're going to test to see how good a manager he is. They've got Newcastle tomorrow, but then they've got Luton the week after, Chelsea, Brentford, Bournemouth. So those kind of games now we can really test to see how good Vincent Kompany is. Yes, he's under pressure, but I don't think he's anywhere near as much pressure as the other one. So I don't think personally Vincent Kompany should be sacked, even though he's got off to a bad start. Next, I want to talk about Luton. Now, Luton again is another one where I can't see at all any kind of situation where Luton are going to sack their manager. Let's be honest, Rob Edwards, I think there's a lot of pressure. Sorry, there's no pressure on him whatsoever. Aside that, realistically, looking at that starting 11, it's a championship side. They've conceded less goals than Burnley. They've conceded less goals than Sheffield United. They've conceded less goals than Wolves. So they've got off to an okay start. Yes, I know it's 1 point and it's not great, but they've shown fight, so I don't think he'll be sacked personally, because I think it's all relative, isn't it? When you look at these sides and you think about the money Burnley have spent, you think about the money Sheffield United have spent. Luton haven't spent anywhere near as much, and they're in a completely different situation, different structure. So as I said, perspective is the massive thing here. So I don't think he's under any pressure or any scrutiny. I personally think whatever he does, it's going to be a good season, to be honest, because they just need to get some points on the board. That is it. Next, now we talk about Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth is the one where I think is a really interesting case. Now, this is one that we can discuss in quite a lot of detail, because they were the side that I thought were going to absolutely smash it this season. And on this weekend, they've got Arsenal. And I know it's a difficult one. It's not an ideal game for the side, but this is the one where I think, do you know what? This is the side where there could be a sacking on the cards, because when you come looking at Bournemouth's next few fixtures, if I get them up now, load them up on my screen, the next few matches they've got, here we go, you ready for this? So the next few games, they have got Arsenal this weekend, then Everton, Wolves, Burnley. Everton, Wolves and Burnley straight after that. And those 3 games will decide whether this man stays in the job, because personally, I thought they were going to do really well. We saw him at, I think it was Real Vallecano last season, and he got off to an absolute flying start there. Took them from second division side straight into the top division and got them European football. And I always struggle with his name. Adoni Irala, I would never say his name. I always really struggle with it. But we can't see his football, and again, it's maybe like a question mark with his naivety, maybe, because I know it's high pressing football. It's playing out. It's very direct. It's get the team up the pitch. But the problem is with that, they don't have the players to do it. And I look at the squad, and I know they've spent quite a bit of money, they've invested, but I still don't think it's quite there. So I think he's probably the one under most scrutiny here. Now, I think out of the managers we discussed so far, I think the Bournemouth manager is the most likely to be sacked, and potentially, probably, depending on those three results and going into those three games, I think is where we'll really decide and test how good a manager he is. So personally, right now, I think he's probably under the most scrutiny because, again, they've not had an easy start. You look at the sides they've played Brighton, they've played Brentford, Tottenham, Liverpool, West Ham. Like it's not ideal, but it's an easier start than you look at the likes of Burnley. So I think he's probably under the most scrutiny out of the managers, other than the one we're about to discuss next. So I think we'll decide his future in the next three games. I think they need at least, I mean it seriously, they need at least 6 points from those three games because they're playing Wolves and Burnley both at home. And if they don't win those two games, then he has to be sacked. So question marks now with the Bournemouth manager, in my opinion. I think, I'm not sure if it works, kind of the fit. I kind of got the idea, and you looked at stats-wise, he was the most effective presser. His side was last season in all of Europe, and I kind of understood the kind of idea, what they were trying to do there, but it just hasn't worked out. And sometimes you've got to put question marks with tactics and how they'll work and how they transfer from Europe over to the Premier League. Now on to Wolves. Now Gary O'Neill is one that I think a lot of people have got massive question marks. They got off to an okay start. They played a lot better than everyone expected. Obviously with Lopetegui leaving in the summer, there was a lot of question marks. How would he get on? And he started off okay, got unlucky against Man United, and they obviously came back against Luton on the weekend. But it's still not good enough, is it really? Like, you look at their games they've played so far, they've got battered 4-1 by Brighton, they've lost to Man United, they beat Everton, which was the big result for them, they lost to Palace, they lost to Liverpool, and then they drew to Luton. And to be honest, they really hung on in that game. At points, you could argue that Luton were unlucky not to get the win there. They've lost to Ipswich in the Cup. There's a lot of question marks, and not only that now, they've got Man City this weekend, and they've got Aston Villa next weekend. It's not looking good. I think Gary O'Neill, personally, is most likely to be sacked out of all the managers first. He is my choice. I spoke about the Bournemouth manager there saying you've got 3 games to decide. I think Gary O'Neill will be sacked potentially in the next couple of weeks, depending on how results go, because it's not looking good at all. A thing that Wolves have kind of had a lot of pride on under Lopetegui, under Bruno Lage, everything they did was always defensively strong. Everything in their side was built on the fact that they didn't concede goals. They weren't scoring many, but they never conceded. But then you look at it, they've scored the same amount of goals as Luton and Burnley. Sheffield United have outscored them, and they've conceded more than Luton. They've conceded more than Bournemouth. They've conceded more than Everton. And that's the thing. We've seen a shift. And if they're not scoring and they're conceding, it's a recipe for disaster. I know it's a really obvious thing to say, but I just think personally, Gary O'Neill is not the right man. And I look at it, they've got some really tough fixtures coming up. They've got Man City, Villa, Bournemouth, then Newcastle, then they've got Sheffield United, and then Tottenham. I can't see them getting many points here. And I spoke about it before the season started about how I thought they were going to get relegated with losing a lot of the big boys, releasing a lot of players. It's a really difficult job, and I understand that. But I personally think Gary O'Neill, for me, is the one I think is under real pressure. I think it's going to really pile on with the result against Ipswich. Luton, it's not great, is it? You've got to be beating Luton when you're in a relegation scrap down there. You should be expecting more. Yes, I know circumstances, it was good that they got a point out in the end, but if you said to a Wolves fan before the game, you're going to get a point and concede at Luton, they'd have gone, absolutely no chance, I wouldn't take that. So yeah, Sean Dyche next. They showed fight against Villa and against Brentford. Both one in the cup and one in the league, so I don't think Sean Dyche is under any pressure, even though he's on the same amount of points as Wolves. We've seen kind of like an upturn in form, an upturn in play, so I personally think Sean Dyche will be okay. He's got that in the bank. Next, Maurizio Pochettino, the final manager to discuss. I thought, you know what, I'm going to hold you onto this because you knew I was going to come on to him. Now, Maurizio Pochettino, this side right now is just in dire states. We've just seen a stat come out that Leicester have scored more goals in 2023 in the Premier League. Chelsea find themselves currently 4 points off the relegation zone, 1 win, 2 draws and 3 losses. But the big thing for Maurizio Pochettino, the one good sign is the fact they've only conceded 6 goals. Now, when you look at that and the rest of the Premier League, Liverpool have conceded 5, Tottenham have conceded 7. They've conceded less goals. They've conceded the same amount of goals as Arsenal, so I think defensively they look quite strong. And I know a lot of people say, that means nothing, but the XG, they're looking good with XG. I think eventually it's going to click with this Chelsea side. I know a lot of people say to me, I think they're playing nice football. They're missing something, and I know it will come with time. I understand it's a really difficult situation, but I don't think it's Pochettino's fault. You look at the squad, I know there's always question marks the fact they've spent hundreds of millions. A lot of people go, but they're throwing cash at it and everything like this. But it's not as simple as that. Spending money does not mean results. You look at Man United, for example, as a prime example. The biggest spend before Chelsea, this big spending, they'd spent the most money in the last 5 years and they've taken nothing from it. They haven't won a Premier League. Yes, I know they won a Europa League and they've won a couple of cups here and there, but it doesn't directly mean instant output. And I think the biggest thing with this Chelsea side as well is they've completely got a new entire team, and they've got the team is so young. You think about it, they get an average age, I think it's around 24 right now in the squad, and they've got a 38-year-old playing. That just shows you how ridiculous that is. 24 average age with a 38-year-old. You're looking at bar Thiago Silva, Raheem Sterling, who's 28 years old, as one of your experienced individuals. It's crazy. It's a really difficult situation. I don't think the cards that Mauricio Pochettino has been dealt hasn't really helped him. I know a lot of people go, but it's excuses. It's insane though when you actually look at it from back and you try and take away the money and things and look at it as a whole. I personally think Mauricio Pochettino is not at fault in this situation because it's going to take time. You can't expect a full new squad of kids to gel like that, and a lot of these players have only played like a handful of professional appearances, so I don't think Mauricio Pochettino is under that much pressure. And obviously, I know they lost last week against Aston Villa, unlucky with the red card. I think going into these next few games is a real telling sign because they've got Fulham this week, so they have to beat Fulham. Then they've got Burnley, so they've got two chances there, really, where you'd expect them to get some results. So personally, I think that Mauricio Pochettino isn't really at fault, and I don't think he should be sacked. But you never know with Chelsea. Obviously, Abramovich is gone now, so it's not going to be the same kind of hiring and firing. But we saw it with Ted Bowley with the way he took the way Todd Bowley sacked Potter, but I don't think that's going to happen this time because it's a completely different situation. I think Mauricio Pochettino, I think we need to give him time. I know with the others, I'm not giving them time because it's a different kind of situation. Again, perspective is a massive thing with this. So personally, I don't think Pochettino's at fault, and I don't think Pochettino should be sacked. So the two managers that I think are the big ones is you're looking at Gary O'Neill, and why do I always struggle with his name? Iraola. But I do think Gary O'Neill is probably the first one to be sacked because you've already seen pressure from the Wolves fans. Results aren't looking good. Performances aren't looking good either. And they've actually played some of the sides down there now. And the fact that they didn't get a result against Luton, I think, is a big telling sign and kind of summarises what's going on for them going forward. Man City and Villa next for them. It's not great. But then I think the fact that on the 21st of October, the two managers that I've said are under pressure battle it out. Could that be the battle of the sack race? Who knows? But thank you for watching. Please let me know your comments and your thoughts. As I said, please drop me a comment down below. I read and reply to all of them. We're trying to build a nice little community here. And thank you for watching. And thank you for subscribing. I will speak to you guys soon. Thank you. Goodbye.